Okay. So welcome. We're on day 3. And thank you guys so much for hanging in here. I'm going to start the slideshow. On day 3. So just a reminder for our daily online housekeeping comments. You can put comments in the chat or in the margins of your worksheet. On the worksheet today, we're starting on page 8. And at the divergent views discussion 1, and we will address questions and comments during reflection slides and during discussions during our exercises. Please silence cell phones and feel free to silently excuse yourself if you need to use the restroom, as we won't break for the 2 hours, except to reflect and discuss. And during exercises and discussions, we may turn off the slides and look at each other. And you can use the worksheets I've sent you to track what we're doing at those times. Although I think I've been leaving the slides up, and that's been working okay on a lot of occasions. So for divergent views, this is a long definition, but the definition of divergent views is thoughts about the way the world works that arise from special messages and disregard consensus reality. Somehow, when people get special messages, the divergent views they get are different from consensus reality. These thoughts explain how messages are possible. Divergent views are speculations we make that often aren't wrong. In fact, many may be more accurate than what is often agreed upon in consensus reality. Often people will deny that our divergent views are real because they fit into an illness management, an illness narrative, and because they find out how we got them, and how we got them is through special messages, and that doesn't seem right. Many may use reality checks to discourage us from viewing the world in these valid manners. Divergent views deserve to be studied and can contribute positively to the welfare of others. Thus, we vie to normalize them. They can also lead to errors and can lead to damaging times when we do retaliations or social sanctions that can get us in trouble. So divergent views are a little more difficult to deal with. But I want to start out by pointing out that there's a lot of consequences to disbelieving divergent views. Many message receivers endure negative consequences when people disagree with them about their divergent views. Some may have been treated so badly at times or are sensitive to being hurt that they will not trust you when you disbelieve their divergent views. Things like anger, shutdown, or other challenging behaviors may happen because divergent views are being challenged, leading to re-traumatization. Clearly, when somebody is re-traumatized and feel abandoned or feel hurt or feel distressed because we're not believing them, because of that, once we are entrusted with a person's divergent views, we need to be aware of our body language. Our energy will be judged with razor acuity as to our openness and curious inquiry into how what they say is possible. Our own understandings of conspiracies and ability to hear them can help us listen in validating manners. I think building trust is so important, but building trust and disregarding a person's divergent views don't go hand in hand. When you convey behavior that identifies you as a defender of consensus reality, you might rupture trust. The message receiver may not share their divergent views with you or the experiences they've had. If the supporter feels like they are essentially balancing on a tightrope not to invalidate the divergent views, they may need to commit to studying conspiracies or buy into more divergent views to rebuild trust. Many supporters do not know how to validate and erroneously conclude there's no point to letting message receiver talk about special messages at all because they're just going to get upset. But validating them becomes very important. So I have this picture of it's important to know about conspiracy theories and study conspiracy theories. Now, in my story or Clyde D's story, conspiracy theories are very, very important. Other people may be more spiritually focused, and then some of the spiritual divergent views come up. But we're going to focus on the conspiracy theory aspect in divergent views today. But when we do later portions, when we get to mad diversity, we're going to find that basically everything out there is a divergent view. And there are many different ways we can make sense of what's going on. So if you get a divergent view, you want to validate the ways they might be true instead of telling me they aren't. You want to normalize them by knowing and expressing and legitimizing facts or theories that make them possible. You want to encourage more research into avenues like coast-to-coast documentaries, movies, or YouTube. And you want to be able to disclose where you have done your research to demonstrate how you made up your own mind about divergent views. And this can happen from also, you might learn conspiracy theories by listening to other people you work with and just recognizing that they have conspiracy theories and studying some of their conspiracy theories. Many people do a lot of research into conspiracy theories. There's what I like to call a quid pro quo technique, which can be very important to getting people to open up about divergent views. Because there's so much resistance to sharing divergent views, if you initiate the discussion about your divergent views, sharing your divergent views, and let them disagree with you, especially if you have, in my case, if I share some of my divergent views that I've had from my story, a lot of people are quick to disagree with me, and they'll test me out by calling me schizophrenic or that I'm wrong or that they can be pretty hard on me. And then when they see that I can handle it and still be in relationship with it, then they'll come around and feel safe to share their divergent views, because even if I disagree with them a little bit, they disagree with you on yours. So, and that is, that kind of give and take can be really important to opening people up about their divergent views. Like, if you don't know about conspiracy theories, hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll know a lot about them, because I'm going to be sharing them tonight. And yeah, the quid pro quo becomes part of trust building, and expressing out their ideas and knowing facts about them can be very important. So back to the Clyde D story, which was the one I shared last week. If you get nothing but divergent views from the Clyde D story, if I come in and I say, I'm being extorted by the mafia and encouraged to consider what it's like to be a mafia leader. My coworkers are breaking into my apartment and driving my wrench down the road to leave me a message. The police and high levels of government, like the Secret Service, are behind it. And I could easily lose my $9 an hour job, and my family is behind the whole thing. If I say all these things, what you do want to do is you do want to get excited and enthusiastic, because I'm telling you something that's very private and that I hold very tight. I might be doing it because I'm in desperation, but still being excited and enthusiastic is not what people are used to seeing. You want to ask for and isolate the special message experiences that have led me to these ideas, and you want to tell me this really has happened to you or others like you. What you don't want to do is you don't want to defend consensus reality. You don't want to roll your eyes. You don't want to call me ill and hospitalize me. You don't want to ask me, did you take your medication? Did you take your medication? You don't want to prescribe me more medication or tell me that I'm very ill or sick. Those kind of responses oftentimes lead to re-traumatization and lack of trust. So delving deeper instead of disagreeing. When facing divergent views that don't sound accurate, that sound way out there, like if you're talking to somebody and they tell you they're the CEO and one of the most powerful people in the United States, and they are not looking like that and they're in a psych program, you still want to delve deeper into what they believe. Identify a real researchable conspiracy and study it. Look at real details that might validate the message receiver's perspective. Sharing those details with the message receiver and seeing what happens. So if you can find a detail that you can validate, like a lot of really high level people who run this country are unknown, and people are unknown to people, and they're very smart like you, as a way you can believe in the person. You want to look at the facts in the ways that you can believe what the person says, and know that if their divergent views are really complicated, that they're probably, even if they're way out there, they're probably pretty smart to develop those perceptions, and they're probably based on some realities. You want to inform and normalize. Try to give the message receiver information that will help inform them about the mystery of what's happening to them. Oftentimes people are confused, even though they have these strong beliefs. And if you give them more information, like if somebody had come and taught me about the Italian mafia or other government conspiracy information, I would have been really interested. And I would have, I didn't really go into the internet and study a lot of things. I studied a lot of things when other people shared them with me. And that it would have really like blown me away if somebody started telling me there's 5 families in New York and they control the mafia in New York, and started giving me the names of those, that would have really been helpful. You want to process associated information to help normalize their internal thoughts. So what I want to do now is do a little consideration of what might go on if we study some conspiracy theories about the history of mind control studies at Harvard University for Clyde D. And I'm going to start out with this.
This video is supported by CuriosityStream. August 30th, 1949 was not a great day for most people in the United States because that was the morning that they got up and while eating their breakfast, they read their newspaper and found out that the Soviet Union had their own atomic bomb. Well, if that don't just burn your bacon. Up until then, we were the only country that had this incredibly dangerous weapon. And it wasn't just that one of our ideological enemies now had this thing. It was how they got it. Spies. An international espionage ring that got their hands on the blueprints, and now they have a weapon that could take out one of our cities. This kicked off the Cold War, and with it, an obsession in national security circles with spies. The entire world basically became a spy versus spy comic. Like, this is a thing that actually happened. Georgy Markov was a Bulgarian dissident. He had fled the country because he had spoken out against the communist government, so he sought refuge in London. So one day he's in London, he's waiting on a bus, and some stranger passes by and accidentally pokes his leg with his umbrella. Only it wasn't a stranger, it was a Russian spy, and it wasn't an accident, and the umbrella was fitted with a pellet gun that fired a tiny little, almost invisible pellet filled with ricin powder. Just enough to kill a man. Which it did, 4 days later. This idea, this feeling that anybody could be a spy and nobody was safe was just pervasive in the post-war years. It even made its way into our cartoons. Did you ever wonder where Boris and Natasha came from? And it was in this environment of panic and secrets and one-upsmanship that the CIA concocted one of the craziest schemes they would ever come up with. The idea was, what if you could control people's minds? Like, what if you could brainwash a rival spy to work for us and not even know they're doing it? Give us any secret we could possibly want, even carry out assassinations for us. This program became known as MK-Ultra. MK-Ultra was a top-secret project spearheaded by the CIA that was kept out of the public's knowledge until 1974 when the story was broken by Seymour Hersh of the New York Times. To this day, it's still shrouded in secrets and mystery, and it's the birthplace of 1,000 conspiracy theories. It was the brainchild of CIA Director Allen Dulles, who apparently got the idea after hearing reports of American prisoners being brainwashed during the Korean War. In fact, he warned in a speech at Princeton in 1953 of Soviet brain warfare. Based on this concern, he gave the green light for the CIA to research what kind of drugs and hypnosis, electroshock therapy, and other various and sundry methods could be used to actually control people's minds. Luckily for Dulles and his team of mind melters, there was a new drug out there that was all the rage with the beatniks and the weirdos, known as lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD. I don't need to explain to you what LSD does. It's been around for a while now, but at the time it was brand new, and the people at the CIA started to wonder if this would be a way to kind of open up people's minds and allow you access to it and control over it. So at the same time that there was a nuclear Cold War going on, there was also something of an LSD Cold War going on, with reports in the 1940s that the Soviet Union was actually trying to buy up the world's supply of LSD, which the CIA assumed meant that they were on their way to deploying legions of acid-controlled sleeper agents into the field, which is dishonorable, unethical, illegal, and damn it, we're just gonna have to do it first. The goal of MK-Ultra was to turn subjects into unwilling assassins. In one of their experiments, they tried to brainwash a woman into shooting another sleeping woman in the room. And in another experiment, they tried to implant a trigger into a subject's mind that could be spoken over the phone that would cause them to go and plant a bomb somewhere. Some of the subjects in these experiments were volunteers, many of them from the military ranks and universities, but some of them were prisoners. In fact, some pretty notable prisoners. One was Boston crime boss James Whitey Bulger, who volunteered in 1957 in exchange for some bonus good time. According to Whitey, we experienced horrible periods of living nightmares and even blood coming out of the walls. Guys turning to skeletons in front of me. I saw a camera change into the head of a dog. I felt like I was going insane. I mean, don't feel too bad for the convicted multi-murderer, but you know, blood coming out of the walls. Doesn't sound like a great day. In later life, Bulger claimed that some of the experiments gave him permanent brain damage, which is certainly not something that he signed up for. But at least he did sign up for it, because a lot of people didn't. Later on, testimony from a CIA official claimed that there were actually a lot of private companies that were working with the CIA on MK-Ultra, and they had no idea that they were doing it. And this is also true of a lot of different agencies and institutions as well. And the names were withheld in these experiments to protect the subjects' identities, as well as to protect the CIA's own butts. But because of that, there's a lot of mystery still surrounding all this. There's a lot of stuff that we don't know that actually happened. But what we do know is pretty bad. Like the fact that they secretly experimented on mental patients. You know, people with no autonomy and who are already a little disconnected from reality. So, that's cool. Ironically, some of the most damaging experiments took place in Canada. Yes, Canada, the home of Alan Thicke, Dudley Do Right, and Michael Cera, also played host to MKUltra's Subproject 68, which just sounds like something out of Stranger Things. There were 149 known subprojects of MKUltra, and 6 of which performed their experiments on unwitting victims. This one was one of the worst. Dr. Donald Cameron, a respected Scottish-American psychiatrist, began working with the CIA in 1957. From then up until 1964, he subjected patients at a mental hospital in Montreal to variations of a technique he called psychic driving. Some patients were dosed at LSD, some were given electroshocks, some were kept in medically induced comas for weeks while they listened to taped messages, and some got a buffet of all the above. The point was to break the subjects mentally, basically erasing who they were so they could be built up again. And in several cases, Cameron was actually able to delete memories. In some of his patients, they were reduced back to childlike toddler states, like some of them had to be re-potty trained. In 1980, a Canadian news program, The Fifth Estate, interviewed some of the victims of Dr. Cameron. They told of changes in personality, the loss of ability to focus, and
So that's a little bit about MK Ultra.
This video is supported by CuriosityStream.
Oops. So I saw that video and I heard about MK Ultra from other people. And then I went and I saw the Unabomber show on Netflix. And I looked on the internet and I saw the guy who mind controlled Ted Kaczynski. I did some other little research. I saw the CIA director who used LSD on subjects unwittingly, unknowingly took it. And I learned about Timothy Leary. I learned about Whitey Bulger, who signed up for MK Ultra, and Robert Hunter, who is the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Ken Kesey, who is a Grateful Dead musician. And then I came across a familiar face. This is my grandfather, and he was the head of the psychology department at Harvard for a little while, and that brought me back to me. And I do know that my grandfather's sister was put in a mental hospital and lobotomized when he was a young man, and she lived in institutions the rest of her life. So that just adds a little flavor to the video. And I wanna ask you guys what has been gained by inquiring deeper into the divergent views that Clyde D has. How do you think your understanding of what we just learned might impact Clyde D's belief about the mafia and his behavior while working at the Italian deli? Anybody have any thoughts? Yes, Karen.
I definitely see the normalizing of the experience. That's what stands out to me for the answer to question 1. The research is there that you said was important to have the ability to share about more and to be able to discuss it some more.
Right. Kind of would open Clyde D up so he'd be talking about what he really thinks. I think. Yeah.
It looks like for question 2, I just need to reread it. I'm just a little distracted because my cat is crying at the door and the door is closed so I can hear in this.
Oh, if you need to let him in, let him in. That's okay.
Just 1 second.
Okay.
Let's see. I got distracted. How do you think your understanding would impact Clyde D's beliefs about the mafia?
How do you
Well,
think?
I think he may open up more, which is what what I heard you say was one of the hopes of the discussion, so that we get to know more about the divergent view and hear more about what the belief system is. And
Right.
so that would be a way to get to know Clyde some more.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I definitely need to get the door and let my cat in. Maybe she
Yeah,
needs
go
to use
ahead.
the letter box.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. Linda, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, I think by sharing your understanding of some of the conspiracy theories, it would also build trust between each other and would be more of a, I don't know, more of a true relationship. In a better way of explaining it, I don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
just on the
Genuine
same level.
Yeah. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is a mentality, indulging in conspiracy. There's a mentality that pervades amongst many trained individuals that engaging in conspiracy discussions with message receiver only gives them permission to indulge in their sickness. In my experience, I needed the opposite, more information that could help me understand the world with which I was dealing. I think I would have seen MK Ultra information as it would have made me more suspicious when I was in the state hospital, but it would also help me feel less like I was crazy for all the crazy things that were happening in the state hospital, and I just couldn't believe they were happening. Leading group therapy and conversing with people who are versed in conspiracy helped me learn things so that I could feel safe again. So I think that conspiracy is important. I also learned more about Whitey Bulger by reading this book when I was writing my memoir by Michael Patrick McDonald. His family was a victim of two or three of his brothers were killed by Whitey Bulger, and that led me to this. This
did both. He
Yeah.
paid, he talked, and he had a long.
Sorry about that. We get to the beginning here. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but
After a lifetime of crime, 16 years on the run, a lengthy trial, and 5 years in federal prison, officials announced today that James Whitey Bulger is dead at the age of 89. He was killed soon after arriving in a new facility in West Virginia, where he'd been transferred due to what was described as an ailing health. The Boston Globe is reporting a fellow inmate with mafia ties, they say, is now being investigated for his murder. Bulger was, of course, Boston's most infamous criminal, had been serving a life sentence for his involvement in 11 murders, though he was accused of plenty more. I'm joined by Brian Kelly, former assistant U.S. attorney and lead prosecutor responsible for putting Bulger behind bars. He's now a partner at Nixon Peabody. Good to see you, Brian.
See you, Jim.
Peter Galzenis, former longtime columnist of the Boston Herald, has covered Bulger's trial and his life extensively. Also spent his life in South Boston. Peter, good to see you. John Red Shea, who was a top lieutenant in Bulger's Winter Hill Gang in the 80s and 90s, spent 12 years in prison for cocaine trafficking. Thanks so much for being here, John. I appreciate it. Let's start with you. Do you know anything about this so-called mafia-connected person or people who killed Bulger?
No, I'm sure we'll hear the details the coming days, though.
Are you sure we'll hear the details?
Yeah, everything gets out, and this will too.
You know, Jay Carney, who you spent a lot of time in a courtroom with, who obviously represented Bulger, put out a statement. He said, "I was proud to be appointed by the federal court to represent James Bulger. He was sentenced to life in prison, but as a result of decisions made by the Federal Bureau of Prisons, that sentence has been changed to a death penalty." I don't want to put words in Jay's mouth, but I will for a second. As you probably know, this facility had 2 inmate murders in the last year. Do you think it's a coincidence that the Bureau of Prisons decided to put Bulger there?
Look, prison's a violent place, and someone who has a past as an informant is not going to be looked upon in high regard by the inmates. But I think if he's suggesting the government did it on purpose, that's a little far-fetched.
I don't know if he's. I'm asking the question, but you don't think he put a purpose. You spent time in a facility.
That's
Could
correct.
something like this happen
Absolutely.
without the guards cooperating?
Absolutely. I said that-
Absolutely could happen or couldn't?
absolutely could happen.
Could.
I said this prior to him going to prison. I said if he is put into general population or even close to general population with the right people in that facility, they will do what they have to. These guys
Because he was a rat? Because that's what put you over the edge.
Because he
with
was
him.
a rat, but not only that, in some cases it's because of notoriety. Hey, I took down a legend in their mind.
So, what's the mood in South Boston? I have to say, as I didn't spend my whole life here, unlike you. When I would encounter people in South Boston, when I moved here, who would sing the praises of Whitey Bulger and what he did for the poor lady next door, are people, anybody mourning his murder?
I haven't taken the pulse, but I can tell you in New South Boston, more people relate to him through Johnny Depp than who he was. I mean, I think it's not going to, you know, the places that they hang out now that used to be the blood buckets of blood before. You know, these kids, millennials, are more interested in watching the Patriots or you know.
But how about your generation? Some of them are still alive, Peter Gelzinis, as you know.
think, you know what I think? I think he was probably pretty philosophical about how things were going to end for him. I really do.
And
I don't think at this point that, you know, he was gonna scream and yell about where he was going. I think he knew what ultimately could happen to him.
How do the alum of the U.S. Attorney's Office, do you care that he's dead?
Well, you know, don't want to sound heartless, but
Well,
I'm
but how do you
certainly
feel?
not going to lose any sleep over it. He's a violent guy, psychotic killer. He had a lot of victims, and he's a violent guy who met a violent end. So it's hard to feel a lot of sympathy for him.
I think you said earlier today, if I know you'll correct me if I got it wrong, Brian, that his years in prison, his death brought some closure to the families of victims. But, you know, at the time of the prosecution, I would see
So, sorry about that again. So I have another couple questions about this. If you guys are able to respond to it a little bit, how do you think Clyde D would respond now after looking at this video? And now that we've done more research, can you better understand what happened to Clyde D and validate him to build a relationship? Is there any of that you can use to kind of understand where he was coming from?
I am not too familiar with this guy, but by just watching that video and how some people, you know, see it as far-fetched, whereas other people who are, you know, can attest to the fact that that is the case, that the government or the prison system can set up to have someone purposely move to another prison. So there's more validation of conspiracies that happen. That's what I see.
Okay, thanks. Any thoughts, Karen?
Could we go back to the slide so I can reread it?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'll reread it. How do you think Clyde D would respond to looking at this video? And now that we've done this research, how can you better understand what happened to Clyde D and validate him to build relationship?
I think what comes to mind is perhaps some excitement. The idea that somebody gets it, that there's somebody else who understands. So that feeling of connection that comes from being understood and validated rather than feeling like the other or bad or different.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, this is something that's tangible and real. And it's exactly what Clyde was going on in my mind back then. So I think that knowing that it's tangible and real, and that there's these different perspectives on it, and that there's these different cultures they represented, would have made me be able to see that there's different perspectives on those that kind of material. And yeah, so thank you guys. Sometimes we might need to broaden our perspective, and I wanted to share a little bit about how I've learned to accommodate alien conspiracy and mean it. I mean, when I was in messages and thinking about the mafia all the time, every once in a while it would occur to me that that aliens might exist, but I never really got into it very much. I was raised to believe in evolution, that human life came from a fish that evolved when the world used to be underwater. I still remember some video back in kindergarten that said that we came from fish. And that's what I tend to think. But what if DNA and other forms of life were initiated onto our planet from asteroids or alien ships coming from other planets? What if the basis of the Sumerian mythology, that aliens descended from other planets and enslaved people, has merit? Many suggest that the Anunnaki mythology and gods were actually aliens. Maybe alien DNA gets passed through human DNA and we are intermixed with male aliens. Maybe some of the history of the UFO conspiracies that were recently declassified by the government actually have some merit. Since I've started to personally think in these manners, I have been able to entertain discussions and build conspiracies in my head that I can use to reach out to others and take their concerns seriously without lying and without hurting myself. So I have a rationale for studying conspiracy in group. When people get isolated in their divergent views and punished, they can become very angry about them and act out in ways that are challenging. However, when they study different kinds of conspiracies and are able to get facts that validate and provide different perspectives on consensus reality, they feel validated and like their time isn't wasted, like they're not alone. The result can be validation, healing, and support that decreases the chances that they will act out in ways that get them in trouble. When there are role models also who navigate consensus reality leading the discussion, it naturally discourages acting out behavior. And this leads me to conclude that group therapy, in which conspiracy information is mixed with personal experiences, is extremely productive for message receivers. I think when you study divergent views, it allows participants to share secret thoughts and experiences that they have not otherwise been able to share. It provides facts and associated realities that help explain how things are possible, while naturally setting limits on other lines of divergent thoughts. It helps participants go towards something that causes them anxiety in ways that enable them to overcome that anxious feeling. So when things happen to them, they're less anxious and they're able to tolerate more. I think it values and validates the experiences and gives them credence. Any thoughts or reflections at this point, or questions? Yes, Karen.
Yeah, I can easily agree with this. I've been in some groups as a participant where when I wasn't well and I was hospitalized, I witnessed a participant in the group who was opening up a little bit, testing the waters, seeing if it was safe to say something. And the leader of the group really wholeheartedly said, you know, you need some more medication, and that's what you need to learn while you're here. And the response in the group was so palpable. I can remember my own response to it was, well, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to talk about anything because that's not what I think. That's not how I see it. I don't agree with that. And I am curious what this other participant really has to say. And it just didn't open up a dialogue. It felt very judgmental too. And it felt like this right and wrong was really in the room, this feeling of the establishment is right, the doctor is right, and the rest of us are all wrong and need to be fixed. And so that feeling of needing to be fixed and improved on and being an ailment, it just really it really got to me, especially when everyone's in the same clothes in a gown and the leader of the group has on a very different outfit. It just creates that separation, that feeling of other and that differentness. And it can really be hard. It can be hard to talk after a situation like that. So I really do like the idea of validating and gaining an enthusiasm for what people say.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for sharing that experience. I can picture that place. I think I know where you were. So, wow, yeah, that's hard. Wow. Any other thoughts or reflections?
Yeah, I think just hearing this viewpoint or to get excited and to explore and to learn more about conspiracies is a wonderful idea. I also experienced the system, and I do see a lot of closed-minded people who, while they have their own opinions, they do have this like us against them mentality. And it's like they really don't want to delve deep into these special messages or alternative viewpoints. And I can see um, how positive it would be to be able to have a group where this is explored more and that people are allowed to speak about it without feeling like they're going to be put on more medication. So it's, yeah, thank you for
Thanks.
sharing this.
So, I want to do a little exercise now, trying it out. And this is a little ask for some examples that we might be able to use later on in our presentation too. But have you ever heard of divergent views that have come across that you've heard people talk about, or in your personal or professional experience? This may be personal accounts of a friend or a loved one or your own. Can we make a little list of some examples of divergent views that you've heard of? Yeah, Karen?
The police have a camera in my apartment and they're watching me. When here's another one. When I'm outside on a trail hiking, there's people hidden in the bushes and there's an ambush planned. And I'm going to try to come up with a third one.
Okay. That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
And a third one. Do you have one or?
I can't think of one right this second.
That's okay. That's great. Thank you. Yeah. How about you, Linda? Can you think of any?
Sorry. Yes. I I have experienced talking with someone who believes that there is something in their mind that allows them to speak to others kind of telepathically. Also, is kind of holds a belief where she has cloned other people, and that everyone has a clone or multiple clones, and they are either, you know, usually doing something like murdering her children or causing a lot of distress, and or sometimes comes to the facility she's at to say that, you know, I'm at the front door to take you out, and a lot of very heavily focused on cloning.
People are clones who are murdering children, murdering her children.
Yeah.
Okay, those are some good examples. Yeah,
I've got one more.
yeah.
It's about the UFO.
Mhm.
A UFO landed in my backyard or is hovering over my place where I'm living, and is at my window, and there's somebody with a camera system on the UFO ship who's captain and can watch me at all times whenever my windows open, so I have to keep my curtain closed, and it's unsafe to go outside. And these are stories that others have shared that I've witnessed. This is not my experience. I want to add that.
No problem.
Okay.
A UFO landed in my backyard, has cameras
Yeah.
that are spying on me.
And the captain of the UFO, like a spaceship, kind of like a pilot in a plane, thinking of it that way, is the person who's able to position this UFO in different ways to watch whenever the person leaves the building or opens a curtain. So the curtains have to remain drawn and the person can't leave.
Great. All right. Great.
Can I add a couple?
Yes.
Or you have the space?
Yes, I do have the space.
Okay. I have there she has a special watch that can transport. Actually, you can get a watch that transports you to, you know, faraway places like China or to New York. She believes that she works as the CEO of Vogue, also works at Wall Street, and multiple jobs that she earns like billions of dollars a second. When she's listening to the radio, it's as if, or she tells me that she wrote all these songs and that also is earning money per second.
Okay, so she can she has a watch that can transport you to China, is a CEO, and what did you say about being a CEO?
CEO of like Vogue
Of
or
Vogue.
of major organizations, that she owns different financial institutions. She works directly in the at the financial district in New York, also in the military. So lots of high, powerful jobs.
And the watch is what enables her to do that. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said she can write music. She's written a lot of the music that's popular.
Yeah, that's on the radio.
Yeah, that's a lot of divergent views, and that's a great example. You know, I think that person must be having a lot of different experiences of both visual and auditory hallucinations, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had somebody like this before too, and it was hard to sit there and not be a little surprised at what they were saying or not know how it was until I started imagining some of the things they might have been hearing and some of the conversations they might have been having with top CEOs and the telepathies and those kinds of things. And then I started to be able to connect with them a little bit more. So those are great examples. So let's take a couple of these and think about what YouTube studies we could do that would support these divergent views, what facts we could provide to validate and support them, how might you use experiences with other conspiracies to deepen your explanation, and how might you use information shared to better believe the divergent views so we can validate them. So with the watch that can transport you to China, I would want to study astral projection. The idea that you can go delve into different dimensions of reality and see different things. That would be something I would want to study, for example. I don't know if anybody's heard of astral projection, but the idea that you can time travel is not uncommon, and could explain a lot of these voice experiences that are weird when you have high-powered people talking to you. You know, yeah. So that would be
I'm
one.
sorry.
Go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, I looked into like the telepathic communication and was surprised how much information they have on that and how much like Elon Musk, whoever the person was who just created Facebook, I forget their names, but
Zuckerberg.
look, yeah, there's, they've been working on this stuff, and it was interesting to, because not only is it like in my, during my time when I was younger, but it's current, this stuff that they're really looking into trying to be able to speak telepathically and other aspects of that. So, because you had suggested that I do that, and that helps. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, great example. Is anybody able to think of something that we could study to validate one of these other ones? Like the UFO landed in my backyard, has cameras that are spying on me, and the captain is watching. Can we think of any kind of forms of study that we might go to try to understand that better?
Yeah, I think we could go with drones. Discussing all the new ways that drones are being used, what they look like, their different capabilities. Some drones, for example, are made to climb rocks and have great ability to scale walls, and others are really good at flying and maneuvering in tight and small spaces, and they are used for spying.
Cool. That's some new information. That would be a great thing to study. Yeah. I also think I'm eager to know more about what this. I did a little bit of research into this recent UFO stuff that was released by the government. Did you guys hear about that? They actually
No.
released stuff that's been sealed for 30 years where they have evidence of flying objects that they can't explain.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think that would help. That would help that too. But the drones, I love that. That's great. I didn't know they could walk. And go up rocks and stuff. That's cool.
I think I saw it on PBS that there was a special around the new types of inventions. I think maybe it was a robotics contest that somebody was coming up with new ways that the drones could move. It was
Wow.
interesting. The other possibility for the example was a smartwatch, and all the new ways that watches are used to count steps and answer phones, and just thinking about the new types of ways that watches can be used compared to even a decade ago. I mean, what's not to say that we could do something we hadn't thought was possible before to help normalize the astral projection
Mm-hmm.
and going to
Yeah.
China. I think it is amazing what watches can do. I think back to how young I was when I got my first watch, and it certainly wasn't in my mind's ability to think of it doing anything more than telling the time, right?
Yeah. I
So,
remember the stopwatch was really like exciting, Clicked over to the stopwatch and wow, look at that. That's amazing. Yeah. And now they're counting your steps and they're connected to satellites,
mhm.
you know.
It is keeping track of us to a certain degree in our habits. It's observing us. It's capable of noticing what we're doing. So that kind of connection into, maybe it can read where I want to go and my travels, because there is a map and a timeline part of the Google
Wow.
app. So, if it can give us maps and give us timelines and where we've been and keep track of all that stuff, well, maybe it can figure more out than that.
Right. Good example. Cool. That's good. So, like I said earlier, I have this picture of this movie Divergent, which came out. People used to tease me about divergent views and they'd say, and this one guy, he said divergent views, and he was talking about me, and he talked in scramble, and I was able to descramble, and he talked in scramble again, and everybody around me said, "Oh, he's talking about drugs," and I had no idea that he was talking about drugs. So I like to think I know a little bit about that stuff, but no, not the way he was. But yeah, just to say that there are a lot of other divergent systems that we can explore, and we will explore them very shortly in Mad Diversity. So I just like to really encourage us to know our divergent views, keep track of them, use them to call up and connect with people. One doesn't have to change a person's mind about their divergent views, but if you know a lot of different kinds of divergent views that others in the culture have, you become a resource And it's best to validate and explore ways that all divergent views are possible rather than reality check, especially using consensus reality. I want to take a minute before we move on to talk about reality checks. They can be very detrimental, and especially if you're siding with consensus reality, like Karen, the guy who said, "I think you just need medication in the hospital," was a great example of somebody who just spat out consensus reality and shut everybody down. You know, I think if you get if somebody has a false accusation against you, instead of reality checking and saying, "That's not true, that's not what I think," be curious about the evidence that the person has collected against you and scan it for messages. You might learn that they're reading your mind, or that they've observed your behavior that you did that you weren't aware of. Try to consider ways the message experiences that implicate you might be true. Provide the message receiver with unconditional positive regard during all false accusations, and continue to collect as much information as possible. Recognize when you are reality checking non-verbally and try in some way to make amends. Tell them a story about an unusual conspiracy belief that you have, so they may reality check you back. That's that quid pro quo suggestion I had earlier. I think that I've learned to notice when people are doing good reality, when people are trying to do reality checks. A message receiver will use you to run their own reality checks without letting you know they're doing it. And when the message receiver is controlled, when they're tricking you into giving them information about reality, that is when it's most likely to work, because they're looking for it. And if you notice that's going on, notice that it's going on, and encourage them that investigating their theories and frameworks is worthwhile, and that you're glad that they're trying to figure out what the truth is. I wanted to, as a last little say about reality checking, I wanted to recall this client that I used to work with, who used to have me reality check in this manner. And one day I got impatient and broke my own rules and cut to the chase and confronted her, saying I could not hear her voices. It was very clear that she was holding me responsible for hearing her voices, and I wasn't. And I just told her that. And she started to get extremely mad at me and eventually fired me. 6 months later, she forgave me, and she came back to me and reported to me that when I told her that I couldn't hear her voices, she started getting ideas of reference from the TV. And through those ideas of reference from the TV, I was being critical of her, and it was causing her a lot of pain. And when she fired me, the ideas of reference from the TV stopped. So I say that to just emphasize that imposing reality can be very damaging to a relationship, and can result in more messages than we have control over that the person might be getting. And it's just something to think about when you want to reality check a divergent view. And so we've come to message mindfulness. Message mindfulness is being able to identify the message experiences without concern for what caused them or what they look like. Letting go of the divergent views, not judging or emotionally responding to the fact that the message happened. So, being able to identify the message experiences without concern for what caused them or what they look like. So if you take a look at this fish, and if you think of each dot as being a message, each dot is a message. What do you see? If you say fish, you will be deemed delusional. So if you see this, you want to say, well, I don't know what I see, but I don't see a fish. But I think that is a point to be made, is that when your message mindfulness, you're not paying attention to what the dots are. You're not connecting the dots. You're denying that the dots are connected, and it can be necessary to do that sometimes. I think message mindfulness is about staying present in the moment. It's a process of accepting each message as it is without making meaning or drawing connections about the other messages that remind you of it. It involves staying present in the moment without thinking about meaning. It is supported by R&R tasks and distraction and focusing abilities. So when you can identify and validate the underlying experiential triggers, it helps relieve the emotional charge. With a lot of mindfulness and by staying present, a person learns to detach from those experiences and become less reactive. Although this takes time, it's something that if you can cultivate, it can be helpful. Working with a validating person speeds the process of detaching from the meaning. So does working with a validating group of people. Message mindfulness is something to shoot for, not something to expect. So what I think this concept, message mindfulness, does is justifies putting words to the message experiences in a validating environment. Recognizes that once you have identified the experiences and the emotional state, it becomes easier to observe them and let go of them. So once you set it, you can let it go. Encourages full participation in the next moment by preventing rumination and judgment of the experience. It suggests that when this is not permitted, the experience becomes like unobserved trauma. It preoccupies the mind, and the person continues to feel endangered or heightened states. I think past experiences are important. Revisiting special message events and describing them in a validating manner helps us heal and compartmentalize those events so we can move on to our next one, so we can let go of them. It's a little bit how trauma treatment works. Taking the time to honor what happened is important before we become expected to pretend it never happened. Just because distress comes back and more is needed doesn't mean that the time spent wasn't helpful. Okay. Excuse me. I think there's 3 parts to the message mindfulness process. Identifying the special message experiences that function as evidence. Initially, this is the only mindfulness practice that can be used. But letting go of the experience without sleuthing or making meaning of the experience, this happens much later when the message receiver finally starts to play back the tapes for what happens when they sleuth. So, yeah, in the beginning, message mindfulness is just simply talking about the experiences. Putting off the sleuthing process till later and participating effectively in the moment. This is learned by practicing meaningful roles. So compartmentalizing is helped by distracting and doing other things. whittling it down to the experience. The profile that we reviewed yet last week is full of divergent views that are behind the experience. But asking questions so you can expose just the special message experience helps remove the divergent views. Like, if you think a UFO landed in my backyard and has cameras that are spying on me and the captain is watching, what is the experience of seeing that? Is that something that they see or that they feel is there? Is it an intuition or is it something that they visually see? Or do they have a feeling in their body that tells them it's there and then they go outside and look and see it's there? I mean, that kind of information is really important. But when a person is able to expose just the experience, it becomes easier to let go of the rest of the concept. Thus, focusing on just the experience makes the list shorter and easier to be mindful of. And this list of 14 messages that I read yesterday, there's probably more different kinds of messages in this, but it's a simpler list than all the long list of ones that share the divergent views along with them. So yeah, the point is to pinpoint the experience, and then that helps people let go. In order to achieve mindfulness, a person must be willing to work on goals and learn from mistakes, playing back tapes of what will happen if they say the word fish. So applied to the day that I talked about, Clyde D's story, I had a couple of questions. These are a little tricky. How can you mirror acceptance and non-judgmental mindfulness towards the events yourself and encourage the message receiver to do the same? So when this is when I was going to work and the air was out of my tires and that whole story. What do you think the quickest way you could inspire hope and strengthen staying focused muscles and keep Clyde D going during the day if you had to help him? Yes, Karen.
Maybe the YouTube would be a good opportunity to say, hey, let's find out where the FBI office is. There's an actual address. And so then we're providing the facts and we know that the FBI does exist. And where is our government located? And let's get to know a little bit more about the government and where it's located. And so we're actually looking into it some more together.
That's a great idea. Wow, yeah. That would help me be more mindful and let go. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. Any other thoughts about how to help Clyde D with be more mindful? Okay, I'm gonna move forward. Yeah, I'll just say I think that actually believing that there was maybe a police inspection of his apartment that wasn't reported might have been helpful. You know, somebody went in and tore up the apartment. That was clear, and I think saying something about that would help me in conspiring to think that something was going on, would help me be more mindful and make it easier for me to make the sandwiches that I had to make at the deli and cut the turkey and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll just say that real quick. To achieve message mindfulness, focus on meaningful and purposeful R&R tasks or social support becomes very important. Some people do it by working, and some people do it by making friends with people. Both are very important. How does someone stop judging these experiences when others grimace and say they are signs of a degenerative illness that have no meaning? And now we're to the phase of flexing. Any comments or thoughts before we move on? I didn't put a slide there, the reflection slide. Any comments or thoughts about message mindfulness or questions? Yes, Karen.
I think one other thing I'd like to add about Clyde D would be doing some mindfulness about the bicycle maintenance. Maybe like, have you checked the air in your tires? Have you thought about oiling the chain? Have you checked the brakes? There's so many different aspects of the bike, and just learning more about the parts and how it functions may be another opportunity to do some mindfulness before leaving and going to work.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. All right. Phase 2, flexing. There are five parts to phase 2, and what we're going to go over today is theories and frameworks and what they are, MAD diversity, functional flexible theory styles, tricksters, and positive spiritual energy solution. I believe we'll probably get through theories and frameworks and MAD diversity today. A theory or a framework is a hypothesis or an educated guess as to the ultimate cause of the message. When the message is received, the theory explains why the message happened. So with this picture of the fish, the theory is, why did Tim put a fish up there for us to look at? What does that mean? And what associations do you make with fish? Is there a special meaning to the fact that Tim put a fish up there? Is it because a fish gets hooked on a hook, and when they take the bait? Was Tim thinking of minnows, or was he thinking of large fish? Was he thinking of Moby Dick? Was there some reason that Tim put that fish is there? So the difference between theories and frameworks. A theory is early on, this is often pre-conscious, like the root of a framework. When a message receiver is an emergency, they might take a dot and say it's the face of a fish before they have all the rest of the dots. A framework asks the question, why did the author put the fish there? What does it mean? I think this is a very important activity to do with message receivers. Identifying and putting words to the theory and framework helps slow down and collect more messages, experiences before they leap to conclusions with fewer messages. Examining different frameworks is something that message receivers may do naturally, and it may help them avoid jumping to conclusions as frameworks get more diverse. We're going to go over a lot of different frameworks, and like I said, it keeps people from jumping to conclusions. Doing it in a group is fun. New ideas slow down the process of jumping to conclusions. So the to-do list, do use your knowledge of different kinds of frameworks to speculate about the sleuthing process of the message receiver. Do use some that are extreme, maybe more extreme than the person is thinking, and some that are more mild or accepted by consensus reality. So for Clyde D, it would be like he's fixated on the mafia, and something that would be more extreme would be maybe about aliens, and something that would be less extreme would be something more like you know, just the police following him. So having different, you know, different experiences, some that are more extreme and some that are less extreme, that really can be helpful tool. Express that you get your knowledge base from experiences with other message receivers. Do explore ways the message receiver already contemplates other frameworks and encourage them to collaborate with yourself and others. Do meet them where they are at in terms of how many messages they experience and speculate at a framework through their lens. Don't get angry at me because I'm motivated to sleuth and make theories and frameworks. Don't suggest that your theory or framework is right and mine is wrong. Don't presume that a theory or framework is accurate simply because it's been included in consensus reality. Don't favor a particular theory or framework because you like a particular philosopher or theorist. I've got this picture of the sleuthing process, and you got the sleuthing spindles, and you see that the theory kind of binds them together into the marionette. So the theory is kind of an invisible force that brings them all together. So exploring mad diversity. There are many frameworks that message receivers use, and the more the merrier. But we will define 6 frameworks that tend to get uncovered, or styles of causation beliefs, to help direct and explain a diverse process. So the 6 that I like to reference are political, spiritual, traumatic, psychological, scientific, and artistic. This naturally happens in groups when stories are told that the frameworks get used and referenced. Discussing YouTube conspiracies, spiritual emergence, and divergent view is a great way to get the ball rolling. It compels participants to join. A supporter who is familiar with psychological theories and many stories of psychosis can be helpful in defining more explanations. There are ways to do this in one-on-one treatment as well. So I'm going to get ready to read you guys a list of this list of frameworks. And when we get to them, if we can try to remember try to define which kind of framework we think this example is. It might be political, it might be spiritual, it might be traumatic, it might be psychological, it might be scientific, or it might be artistic. Maybe if we can write those down or just remember them a little bit, I think we'll be able to do this exercise. So I'm going to start with the frameworks. The first one, messages are your inner thoughts or unconscious beliefs. They are just in your head. We broadcast our unconscious beliefs in ways that cause others to interact with us in ways that make our unconscious beliefs turn into realities. What kind of framework do you think that is? Political, spiritual, traumatic, psychological, scientific, or artistic? Yes, Karen.
I'm guessing scientific.
I would actually think if it's in your head,
Psychological?
Psychological, yeah.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, there'll be some scientific ones later. But although you could say that I could see why you would say scientific too. This is actually object relations theory. This framework is object relation theory in psychology. Let's try this one. Messages come from people following you around and tormenting you in order to control or seek revenge on you. It could be a gang, a government, corporations, police, or the IRS. What would that one be? Political, spiritual, traumatic, psychological, scientific, or artistic?
Dramatic?
Political?
I think it would be political.
Ah,
Mostly,
is
but
hard.
it would be both. It would be both traumatic. It would be traumatic too, because if you have everybody gained against you, political is the idea that you have. It's about power, and that people are distorting power and oppressing you. And I think that example is a really good one for political. Messages are nothing but figments of past perpetrators or abusers.
Ah, okay.
Dramatic.
Yes. Messages come from gods, fairies, aliens, ghosts, or what we in the West call supernatural experiences.
Scientific?
Spiritual?
Spiritual, yeah.
Spiritual.
Yeah, spirituality. Messages are intense fears and phobias that have no rational basis. That one's a little bit hard. I would call that psychological because it's cognitive. What were you going to say? What was somebody else going to say?
Oh, I agreed. I said psychological.
Yeah, I think that's psychological. Messages are processes that help or hurt you in evolving or adapting to the dilemmas of a modern environment.
Mm.
Messages are processes that may help or hurt you in evolving or adapting to the dilemmas of a modern environment.
Psychological or scientific? Which one?
I actually see that one as being spiritual.
Spiritual.
But what was your thinking about the scientific one?
Just in evolving or adapting in a way.
Yeah,
More scientific.
yeah, I could see that evolution a little bit. Yeah, I could see that. None of these are absolutely right, and these categories aren't perfect.
Mhm.
They're just there to kind of help differentiate things a little bit. Messages are a way of processing things that we aren't willing to deal with.
Traumatic?
Could be traumatic, could be psychological too. Yeah, but that one falls in between for sure. This one, I like this one a lot. Messages come from the social thoughts or judgments of others, the social mainstream, or the collective unconscious of others. Social thoughts or judgments of others, stigmas.
Psychological?
Could be psychological,
Political?
could be political. Yeah, both of those.
This is hard.
Yeah, I think when you're sensing the judgments of others, like other people's are criticizing you and it gets in your head, that's actually oppressing you a little bit. So I think of it as political a lot, but it is, I mean, collective unconscious in Jung was a psychological process. So, messages are representations of unconscious beliefs that others you are privy to through intuition or other magical abilities. I would say spiritual. Because magical abilities. I don't know. That's hard. Messages are there to test your ability to be good and evil, and are there to lead you to lead others. That is definitely a spiritual good. Anything with good and evil is spiritual dilemma. And this is the last one. Messages come from subcultures creating code, switching signs of resistance to reflect deviant realities that represent the reality of how the world works. I would call that artistic. So anyway, there are different ways to interpret messages. One of the most popular ways is the targeted individuals, people, the person's being followed by a secret society or technology by a secret society. Then there's the telepathic people. A voice is actually the thoughts of what somebody else is having. Then there's the structural dissociation or parts. That these are parts of us that are fragmented selves, and that that when we hear a voice, it's actually a part of us. This could be very reassuring to people, or it could be very distressing if they don't like the part. It could be spiritual. You could be hearing the voice of God, or you could be God could be putting the banana peel there to let you know something. Traumatic voices or messages, you get re-traumatized by past perpetrators or internalized stigma of others. Premonition voices, experiences that predict and warn the future. Psychic, unconscious voices reveal truthful insight about ancestors, social order, and the universe. And anxiety voices reveal our fears, not our realities. For every single message, any of these 8 examples are possible. And it just goes to show how complicated having messages can be. When divergent views are entrenched in affecting behavior, diversifying frameworks and remembering the limits of our understanding helps. So I want to do a little exercise here on political causation. We're going to focus on political causation for just a second. This is the idea that real secret societies meet behind our backs and corrupt the power process, persecuting us to control or silence us when we speak out about them. Popular terms are targeted individuals, gang stalking, government experiments, electronic surveillance, counterintelligence. This is a lot of the stuff that I was focused on and that we focused on under divergent views. You need to be able in groups to say that politics are okay to talk about so that you can talk about this stuff, because a lot of people don't think politics is a taboo subject. But I was wondering if you could make a list of secret societies that target message receivers. Can you think of secret societies that might try to get message receivers, real ones?
Hate groups?
Hate groups like KKK or something, right?
Yeah.
What else?
Maybe a cult society?
Cult? Yes. Cult is a good example. It might be targeting them. The secret society. Yep. Any other examples of secret societies?
Going back to the video you showed, maybe a research group that's hidden because their research is secretive.
Yes. Secret government research.
Hmm.
But actually, you could argue that the government, spelling this right, the government is actually a secret society, right? Don't they keep secrets? Don't they have intelligence?
Hmm.
Yeah. So the government could be one. The
What
government,
about like major corporations or pharmaceuticals?
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
good ones. Pharmaceutical industry. Whoa, big one.
Even the oil industry. Those have been holding power.
Yeah, oil. I got one. Okay, go ahead. No.
I've heard some people share that fraternities and sororities at
Yes.
different schools are considered different types of secret societies because of their activity being hidden, and you have
It's
to abide by an oath, perhaps, or.
absolutely fraternities and sororities. It teaches us, right?
Hmm.
This reality that there are secret societies out there, and some of them, like what is the one in Yale? It's called Voice to Skull or something, Skull and Bones or something. It a lot of the presidents have been in that fraternity.
Hmm.
So I forget what it's called exactly, but yeah. Um, how about groups of social workers meeting behind your back and making up and talking about you, having a meeting behind your back? Wouldn't that be kind of a secret society?
Yeah.
I think social workers are definitely where I work that we do that. And I find that to be very disturbing, actually. And I think a lot of clients do too. Um,
So it's a secret meeting because the door is closed and the words aren't being shared.
yes.
Hmm.
Don't they do that in the hospitals a lot?
Hmm.
And then then you get the management, the managers of the facility. They're another layer, right? Because they have a secret society that controls the social workers.
I would go
Right.
with the bookkeeper too, or the person who's working on charts, who's handling all the papers and
Yeah,
holding on to papers.
right. Well, the people that are working with the charts, you mean like reading the charts,
Data entry.
data
Just
entry?
even, the person that comes and says, "What's your name? What's your medical insurance?
Hmm.
Your date of birth?" That data entry point where all the
Okay,
information is being collected, because
okay,
all of that's going into the computer, which is a secret. The person on the other side of the desk isn't seeing the screen. It's not shared, so that's the secret.
okay. Data, getting your data taken.
Yes.
Ones that I've heard of, well, clearly I like the mafia
Mhm.
and also Illuminati is really popular.
And there's the military and the,
Yes. Military intelligence, right?
yeah.
Military intelligence. Who's the scuttlebutt? Military intelligence. Yeah, that was something I was definitely thinking of, is that the military was spying on me. Yeah. Yeah. Police, they keep a lot of information about us, and we don't know what they have to say. And I agree with I agree about the data collection, because they could put a note in the chart that you don't know what it says.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about. That's a good one.
And you're not going over it together. You're not sitting side by side in front of the screen. There's that barrier, that wall that's put up where you're only looking at the cover of the computer or the back side of the computer where no information is shown. And the person who's writing everything down has full access and sees everything and decides what goes into the computer system.
Right. That happens a lot when you're signing up for services too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
And the initial point of contact for any kind of medical appointment.
right,
What's your name?
right,
Sitting behind a computer.
great. Well, that was fun. Thank you guys. The next kind of let's spend some time talking about spiritual causation. People are being persecuted or honored by others because they have a connection to a spiritual realm that others don't. Good and evil energies might be getting observed in other dimensions of reality via hallucinations. Spiritual genes or mutant genes causing connection to God, gifting people with skills of remote viewing, astral projection, or telepathy, etc., may exist. The mentally ill are this era's prophets. That's a quote by Oprah Winfrey. Different dimensions of reality, time travel, interplanetary, covert alien conspiracies are managed by God. The idea that how we're here, who put us here, all that kind of question can be spiritual causation. And there's been a lot of research into the spiritual emergence narrative. We may need to fight to justify talking about spirituality in groups, and this must be done in a way that's open to all spiritual concepts. So it can't be proselytizing. But there's that quote: "The psychotic person drowns in the waters as the mystic swims." There's also Western wisdom exists in spiritual works of the Bible, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, Eastern philosophies, in Sumerian, Olmec, Sikh, and Egyptian tablets, in rituals of indigenous societies, and the idea that the religion is the opiate of the masses and functions as social control. All those are works that are about spirituality. And allusions to spiritual concept rest in the most stories or symbols of the occult. So I wanted to take a minute and look at this.
Northern Iraq, along the east bank of the Tigris River, opposite the city of Mosul, lie the ruins of the ancient city of Nineveh, a place originally inhabited by the Sumerians of Mesopotamia. Here, in 1842, British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard unearthed the ruins of the Great Library of Assurbanipal, a royal archive containing thousands of clay tablets with cuneiform inscriptions. Dating to 3000 BC, the messages carved into stone are considered to be the world's first written accounts.
Sumerian tablets are probably one of the oldest form of a written record that we have. They've been translated, and they tell exciting stories about how gods intermingled with human beings and actually had a hand in the creation of human beings. Whether or not it's just mythology or if it's fact, no one really knows.
According to interpretations of the Sumerian tablets, the gods were called the Anunnaki.
What we're looking at here is a Sumerian tablet that actually shows the tree of life, flanked by divine beings. You can see here the Anunnaki on each side. We also see the winged disc, a symbolic reference that the Anunnaki had the power of flight. They actually had necklaces with astronomical references, a moon, a star, various symbols, which even could be symbolized as a wristwatch. Technology being used 6,000 years ago.
The written accounts etched into stone suggest the Anunnaki were giant beings, standing 8 feet tall, who came to Earth in search of gold for their home planet.
When the Sumerian gods, the Anunnaki, realized the toll it was taking to mine the gold themselves, they decided to fashion a worker being, a slave to mine the gold for them. And they explain in the Sumerian creation tales that this was an arduous process. So it's very possible that our genetic evolution was a process done by the Anunnaki to create us in their image and after their likeness.
They created man according to the Sumerian text. They created Adam and Eve. How interesting that the Bible will echo the story, but talk about it in terms of God.
Ancient chronicles of sky beings creating human life are common in early cultures, found all over the world. But while mainstream scholars often dismiss this evidence, might such tangible historical accounts provide proof of alien intervention in man's evolution?
The Sumerians are not the only culture that talks about this. Also in the Quran, it says that language was given to us by Allah or God. The Maya Popol Vuh says that language was given to us by the gods. The ancient Egyptian texts are saying the exact same thing. We should finally come to grips with the idea that extraterrestrials had something to do with our development.
Okay, so that one helped me also deal with
Northern
extraterrestrials.
Iraq.
I have another one here about spiritual conspiracies, and I think this one's worth taking a look at too, and then we'll discuss them.
There are people who hear voices in the Bible all over the place, and they hear voices in the same way that people who hear voices these days hear them. So the most common thing that people hear when they hear voices is their own name said. Moses, Moses, here am I. That's how they open discussions. Now, we tend to be terrified of voices because we live in, I don't know, we live in a shadow of ignorance, really. But if you look at the dissociative identity disorder forums, there's quite a fair degree of consensus on how you deal with voices. That's the forums, the internet forums on people who hear voices. And one of the ways you do it is by focusing on one of the voices. So drowning out not focusing on the others, focusing on one, trying to get their name out of them, right? Now, that's really interesting because in occultism, that's how you get power over a demon or an entity, is by finding out its name. And in fact, even in shamanism, the idea of an ikaro. An ikaro is a phrase of music. So rather than a phrase of letters, a word, it's a specific phrase of music which kind of transmits the power of a particular plant or an elemental force or something like that. So a particular name. Now, and also in the Bible, they keep on asking, like Moses, when he meets Yahweh, he says, what should I call you? And Yahweh says, I am that I am. But you can call me I am to your friends, right? I am, Yehi. And it was evening and it was morning. Vayehi Erev. Vayehi. Yahweh, it's the same word. Beiness, isness is what Yahweh's name is. So back to the voice hearers. If some of the forums talk about people developing good names, good relationships with the voices in their heads, and then you don't hear so much about people who have good relationships with voices in their heads. I've got a friend who's an acupuncturist, And it's one of the ways that she does her job is by listening to the voices in her head. Now, she doesn't go to take herself to the psychiatrist and say, I've got voices in my head. She charges people money to as the voices in her head are telling her where to put the things, right? So voices are quite helpful sometimes. Some people again on the forums will say, the voices used to be troubling, and quite often they do come in an aggressive manner. But if you develop a good relationship with the voices, then they start to tell you things like people give the example of one of the examples in my book is someone was told he's a farmer, and the voices tell him, oh, your cows have broken into the feed room, for example, and off he goes, and yeah, they have. Someone else is looking for her camera, and he says, oh, your camera's in your bag. Oh yeah, so it was. Now, this is very common in occultism, in kind of shamanism, the idea of making an enemy spirit into an ally, right? By learning its name. What does a name mean? In Hebrew, Shem, it means fixed. So once you pin it down and hold it down, get a power over it, get it to behave itself, then it becomes your ally. So Moses says, for example, how can I go and challenge Pharaoh? I'm Gan. I've got a stutter. And Yahweh says, I will be with thee, right? So you don't need to worry about your rubbish manner of speech. He said actually uncircumcised lips is the word he uses. Yahweh puts words into his mouth, and sometimes we find that. I don't know if artists find that their pen is controlled. Like William Blake talks about this, writing against his will, dictation, 12 or 16 lines at a time. Nietzsche, again, it also talks about an overwhelming, like floods of tears and overwhelming urge to write. I mean, I know in my experience, it was an absolute urgency to write, and if anything got in my way of writing, I would be very, very short with them. And sometimes the words will come faster than I can get them down. I think it's a very common experience in artists and writers of that compulsion. Interestingly enough, you see it with there's examples of people who had medicine, were taking medicine for epilepsy, who might reduce their dose. For example, there's a woman who reduced her dose and then started compulsively writing poetry. So epilepsy, there's another, it's a kind of mental illness, I suppose. But the phenomenology of it, which is convulsions, seeing visions, ecstasy, terror, they're all described in the literature of mystics and also experiences of visitation in the Bible.
So, any reflections on those spiritual perceptions? Yeah, Karen.
It goes back to the fish. It's like in reading one text from the Bible, if you put that side by side with the image of the fish and the different numbers, it can be seen in so many different ways. And it can be talked about in so many different ways. And that's what comes to mind for me is the fish.
Yeah, the fish is a lot of, that was one of the sign that there's a fish that Christians supposedly put on their cars, the sign of the fish. And when I was in psychosis, I had never seen that before. And it was in California, there were a lot of those signs out. I was trying to figure out, what does that mean? What does that mean? Is that a cult? And then I found out it was Christians. And I think it goes back to the story of when Jesus fed a whole room with one fish or something like that. Yeah. Any other thoughts about spiritual emergence? Hearing voices? Okay. We're about out of time for tonight, so we'll leave off here. How are you guys doing? Are you still alive there?
Yes.
Yes. Was this okay?
Yes, very interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
I thought it was fun.
Okay, good. Thanks.
I enjoyed it.
Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah, because when we get into the psychology and the traumatic explanations, we'll get some more views about what these messages mean and stuff like that. There's a lot of different ideas. So, well, you guys have a good week and a good night, and I will see you next week.
Okay,
right.
have a good
Okay.
holiday.
Yeah, you too. Both of you. Good holiday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.